Welcome to another special episode to celebrate that the podcast has reached now 100 episodes. Today, I will reflect back on my conversations with dad advocates over the past 2 years and share how much more focus on dads and care work can help to get to gender equality faster and attract and retain more talent across all genders. When you read about support for care work and providing more flexible work, it very often only addresses women. To make more people think about men as caregivers and to emphasize the importance of flexible work, including part-time careers and job sharing and top sharing, my guests include dad advocates, stay-at-home dads, dads working flexible hours, and professionals talking about dads. I feel strongly we need more dad role models from all over the world. So in today's episode, I'm going to share a few highlights from my dad-related episodes over the past 2 years. Dan Reed shared with me how the 2 things that were really important to him, pursuing his career and being a great dad, started Career Dad after he wrote about his struggle on LinkedIn while on paternity leave with his second child. He received a huge response by dads feeling very similarly. And so Career Dad was born. He also put together the Career Dad Show podcast, talking with people about all different aspects related to being a dad. In our conversation, we also spoke about the fact that few companies have father networks, flexible work, and portfolio careers. Ian Dinwiddie is the founder of Inspiring Dads, a coaching and mentoring business. In the conversation with me, he talks about the time when he was a stay-at-home dad and what he learned from that. We spoke about normalizing flexible work, increased equality via increased paternity leave, and support for dads returning to work after paternity leave. One example he gave as when we will be at gender equality was when an HR department or a recruiter will no longer be able to tell who of the candidates is going to take an extended parental leave. We continued our conversation in a follow-up episode about a year later, and in that episode, Ian also shared with me why men's work-life balance matters for everyone. He also talked about the Great Dad Reset. Until we give men equal opportunities to be caregivers, we will never have equal opportunities for women in the workforce. This quote is from my guest, Josh Levs, who is the top global expert on modern dads at work and UN gender champion. Josh shared his journey from being a former CNN and NPR journalist to suing CNN's parent company about his parental leave to becoming the author of the award-winning book All In: How Our Work-First Culture Fails Dads, Families, and Businesses, and how we can fix it together. We also talked about the importance of a paradigm shift around flexible jobs and how advertising can help with gender equality. Between daddy mode and digital life, my guest, Gabriel Rath, shares with me how he is handling being the dad of 3 daughters and his professional life. He is a digital strategist working at Mandarin Media Agency. Gabriel also has a German-speaking podcast, New Work Chat, where he talks with experts in the digital transformation about their biggest learnings, as well as he talks with his guests about work-life balance and new work. He has had on his podcast flexible work experts, the first Danish mayor in Germany, and his grandfather, among many other guests. Robert Frischbier works as an auditor for the renowned Bertelsmann Foundation, certifying companies as family-friendly employers. He is also the co-founder of Zwei Paar Schultern, two pairs of shoulders, and it is his mission to create and support more family-friendly employers in Germany. Robert explained that the reason he got started in this area of business was that he didn't want to do the pioneer work of creating a family-friendly employer inside a company any longer, but instead he wanted to change the entire system. In our conversation, we talked about father and care role models, flexible work, transferable skills, and the mission of the Zwei Paar Schultern podcast. When men are held equally responsible for raising the next generation, women will achieve true equality in the workplace. I'm a solo dad to my daughter, and my daughter deserves better than we are currently doing. This quote is from Michael Ray, solo dad and author of the book Who Knew? Michael shared in our episode in a very authentic way what it was like to become a dad at an older age and after 2 years as solo dad. He shared the story that started his dad advocacy and presented some insights and an overview of his book, Who Knew? Dad Blog UK host John Adams is also an official LinkedIn changemaker focusing on the topic of flexible work. In my conversation with John, we talk about his experience as a stay-at-home dad, flexible work, transferable skills from unpaid care work, and his dad advocacy. My guest, Rob Sturek, said, fathers can do absolutely everything moms can do, except breastfeeding. In our conversation, we spoke about his experience of being a stay-at-home dad, as well as working flexibly and being the author of Man Raises Boy. We also spoke about his dad advocacy and why it is so important that more men have the opportunity to take longer paternity leave. My conversation with Jake Steiker, the founder of Next Gen Men, was about how his organization is helping to improve the social and emotional development of young men, as well as the health and the well-being of men in communities and gender equity in workplaces. Last year, I published a special episode for Father's Day, which talked about the recently published State of the World's Fathers Report from 2021. I also had the opportunity to talk with one of the co-authors of that report in one of my episodes, Abda Garg. One of the things that really stood out for me from this conversation was that it will take 92 years until we get to equal unpaid care work. And I really appreciated hearing from Abda suggestions and recommendations that the report puts out on how we can get to that equal unpaid care work faster, involving fathers, male politicians, business leaders, and more. In the second year of the Job Sharing and Beyond podcast, I also welcomed guests who have written books related to fatherhood, dad advocacy, experiences about being a dad, and more. Tristan Champion is a French professional who was experiencing being on paternity leave as a French citizen in Norway. And unlike in France, which at the time had a 2-week paternity leave, he took a 5 months paternity leave. He was so inspired by his experience that he wrote a book about it. Translated, it says the title, The Beard and the Bottle. We talked about his book as well as his successful dad advocacy to extend the paternity leave in France. My guest, Amy Henderson, the CEO and co-founder of Tend Lab, wrote the book Tending, Parenting and the Future of Work. In our conversation, Amy talked about the interviews and research for her book and how caregiving creates biological changes for any care worker regardless of gender. I felt that was so important because too often there is still that misperception that really it is only moms who are good at caregiving. I was so appreciative to see and hear from Amy that there are indeed biological changes for anybody who does caregiving. My guest, Michelle Travis, who is a law professor at the University of San Francisco School of Law, is a board of directors member of Fathering Together. She said in the conversation with me, "We will never achieve gender equity in our workplace if we do not get men's sustained involvement in caregiving at home." One of the books that Michelle wrote is called Dads for Daughters. Her book includes research and practical tips on how dads have made or can make a difference in the life and future places and future workplaces for daughters and thus get to gender equity in general. Michelle shares some of the research from the book in our conversation. Hand, heart, and attitude make us leaders and dads. This quote is from Andreas Seltmann, who is a dad advocate, author, and employer branding expert. In the conversation with me, Andreas shared why he wrote the book. Translated into English, it means New Sunland. It is a play on words to New Zealand, and that is where he spent 4 weeks with his older son, and it completely changed their relationship. In conjunction with Canada Career Month, I published the It's Possible series. This series was to help young professionals and students to learn more about career topics outside the typical searching for a job. I had 2 dads who were part of the It's Possible series. Both of them, as you know from listening to this podcast, have been guests with me before. 2 quotes from these 2 episodes that really were helpful for the young professionals, but really for anybody. John Adams told me it's possible to be a man and to be a caregiver. And Michael Ray said it is possible to completely change once you're prepared to forget what others think of you. I spoke with several dads during my 30 days of transferable skills initiative. This initiative on LinkedIn involved 31 days of daily posting things related to transferable skills from activities and jobs that were outside of somebody's typical main job. And so in the case of the dads, I spoke with Rob Sturrock again, and he shared his transferable skills from being a stay-at-home dad and working part-time, as well as the skills that he learned from his dad advocacy and how he was able to use these transferable skills then for his professional job. I spoke with PJ Marcus, who became a dad during the pandemic and because of regulations and restrictions basically was a stay-at-home dad as well as working full-time during these early days of the pandemic, and he shared his transferable skills that he had learned from being a dad as well as other aspects such as living in a different country as well as working or volunteering with youth. I talked with Anthony Sisti. Anthony was an engineer, then he was serving in the military, and he has become a stay-at-home dad, and so he shared his transferable skills from that time. Anthony also told me how his experience in the military has helped him in his stay-at-home dad activities. Björn Michael has been a stay-at-home dad. He has cared for other children, and he is currently traveling with his family on a van through Europe. He shared with me the transferable skills he has learned from all of these different activities and how they have helped him in his coaching business. Thank you so much for listening to this compilation episode about everything to do with dads and dad advocacy. I hope this episode gave you highlights and tidbits from the many episodes that I recorded with dads and dad advocates. And if you are a dad yourself, or you know somebody who is a dad or a dad advocate, and you think that they would be a good guest for the show, please send me a message. The easiest way to get hold of me is probably to go on LinkedIn under Karin Tischler. Thank you so much for listening to the show. We hope you gained valuable insights and new ideas. To keep listening to future episodes, please head over to iTunes or your favorite player and subscribe and give it a rating. We would very much appreciate a review and for you to share it on social media, so more people can start innovating in how they offer employment. Until the next time, goodbye!